Merci bien. And I wanted to say merci also to Kojo Loco, who's my former boss, by the way, when we were both working in Uganda on the Afford project and the Good Life campaign. Thanks, Kojo. These were really needed and great words for all of us. So now we're switching over to another session, a panel session, and we will try to answer the question if artificial intelligence is our new best friend in social and behavior change. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antje Becker-Benton, and I'm your panel moderator today to explore this question. And I serve as the managing director for the behavior change and community health team at Save the Children US. And in that capacity, got quite curious about the opportunities and risks that AI provides for our sector of work. And that is the reason I have invited this fabulous group of people you're seeing in front of you who are deeply immersed in this topic in many different ways. And let me introduce you again. Pacific Ishimwe is the manager of Vayamo's Zambia platform. Pacific is also manages the voice-based Ask Vayamo Anything, the AVA prototype, which is powered by OpenAI and provides access to Zambian women who can't use the internet or have a smartphone. And she will talk about that more. Sheun Nifemi is a lead data scientist and Artiva certified AI engineer and manages the technical delivery team at Data Science Nigeria, which is a leading local organization in this field. Currently, she's working on a generative AI-enabled chatbot to facilitate positive sexual reproductive health behavior through contraceptive use and continuation. Next, you see Sarah Osman, who's the founder of Osman Advisory Services. She is an applied and behavioral scientist who works with a number of NGOs. She is a specialist in the application of behavioral science to intervention design. Her interest in Gen AI includes the potential of designing specialized AI assistants and improving the way that we apply science to designing projects. And today she also speaks on behalf of the SBC and AI working group of the Merle Tech Initiative, which she will talk more about and tell you how you can sign up yourself. Mehdi Snen is next. He's dedicated to bringing the worlds of science, technology, and development to foster applications of AI. And he's the senior advisor on artificial intelligence for the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. He focuses on utilizing responsible AI to drive evidence-based policymaking and foster the advancement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Below you see Gayatri Jajal. She is the Director of Consumer Innovations at Dimagi. And she has helped build Dimagi's chatbot portfolio, focusing on creative, innovative chatbot engagement techniques. And she will speak more about how to identify, create, and deploy AI-based chatbots for SBC programs using Dimagi's new platform, the Open Chat Studio, which is something you can use yourself. And last but not least, there's a picture of Chris Mahoney, who is the CEO and co-founder of Peloria AI, a DC-based public benefit corporation, employing social science-informed data science to forecast, explain, and advise on social risks. He's doing a lot more than that, but you can tell that yourself. You know, in the questions, he's also working for the World Bank, but that will all be way too long for this quick introduction. So next slide, please. Here's our quick session outline. In order to answer the question, is AI our new best friend? We will dive first into a brief intro to artificial intelligence for SBC. We will then elaborate on the place of AI in the SBC design process. We will show how to democratize access to AI applications and explain how using AI capacity to predict social phenomena. And then last rounded off with ethical and research questions around AI and SBC applications to then come to Q&A. I would like to encourage you while the presenters are on to kind of already add your questions into the chat so that when they're done presenting, they can respond directly. I think that's the, time-wise, the most practical way of doing it. And then we'll try to have questions and answers at the end. And with that introduction, I'm handing over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Antje. Hi, everyone. So nice to be with you here today. So I'm going to give you a very, very, very brief introduction to AI. So we have a visual, which you can see that just summarizes some of the key terms that you might have heard being thrown around. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about the simulation of human intelligence by machines, by computers. And within that overall term of artificial intelligence, you will have also heard machine learning, which is about how AI enables tools to learn and improve from experience. And within that, there's even another area called deep learning. And then the green area, you'll see natural language processing, and that's what I want to zoom into a little bit. So you'll hear us talking about NLP and Gen AI interchangeably. It's not precisely correct anymore, but that's kind of, you could say that they're almost synonymous at that point. Next slide, please. So what can Gen AI tools do? So some of you might have been playing around with ChatGPT or with Gemini, Claude, and lately they have enhanced their capacity quite a lot. So last year, at the end of last year, it was mostly text generation, but now they very easily can generate audio and video, and they're increasingly becoming good at code generation as well. And what's really neat now is that you can also speak to Gen AI tools through these various modalities as well. So you can input audio or video and have the AI tool interact with you through those modalities as well. Next slide, please. So just to make it a little bit less abstract, I wanted to tie what some of the Gen AI tools that we have now, how they fit into one of the most commonly used frameworks that we have as SBC practitioners, which is the P process. So if we break it down, Gen AI tools can help us along these 5 steps quite efficiently. So at the inquiry stage, we can definitely use Gen AI tools for research, for data synthesis, for code generation, or even helping us design data collection tools. At the second stage, at the strategy design stage, and this is where my biggest interest lies actually, is helping us to identify suitable frameworks, theory selection, and technique selection. And since recently, OpenAI has made it possible for people without a Plus account to access some of the GPTs that have been available on the store. So I'm going to put in the chat a GPT that I built that's specifically designed for SBC practitioners, and that's supposed to help you to identify evidence-based techniques. So just go ahead and create a free account and you can play around with it. So moving on to the creation and testing phase, which I also find very exciting, we can use Gen AI tools for co-designing prototypes with communities, which Kojo has told us we definitely need to pay more attention to that. And if you think about it, we could really get into the imagination of communities that we work with on how they would like to see different prototypes that we might want to produce for an SBC project. It can also help us generate tailored designs and messages for various audiences. And it can even help us simulate how different audiences might respond to messages that we design. Moving on, it can, of course, help us to tailor infinite numbers of comms messages, and it can also help us to develop monitoring plans. And at the evaluation stage, we are back again at, mostly it would be around data synthesis and code generation, but I'm sure there's also other use cases. So this is not a definitive list, it's just an idea, a snapshot of some of the use cases that are possible. Thank you. Back to you, Antje.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And now we're moving on to hear from Shiun Nifemi with an application she's using SBC models for, and that will be quite interesting, I think, for us SBC practitioners. Over to you, Shiun.
Oh, thanks, Anjay. And thanks, Sarah, also. Sarah, you did a great job in giving us a good overview of generative AI capabilities. I'll just be speaking to a specific use case and our current work, Data Science Nigeria, where we leverage generative AI for positive sexual and reproductive behavior change through contraceptive usage and continuation. Our goal is really to stimulate adoption of contraceptive products, and then we are leveraging generative AI to understand users' behavior, to respond correctly, and then trigger a positive behavioral change. So next slide, please. So on the next slide, our first call was to really to understand the standardized counseling protocol. And here we digitize the counseling protocol, and we adopt the GADA and REDA, which are like the top two counseling protocol. And the reason we adopted, because it was client-centric. We wanted our solution to be client, to give response based on client preference and not to force them to pick a choice. So we wanted to choose the model that represents client-centric approach, and that's why we adopted GADA and REDA. So we had two generative AI solutions. The first one is the chatbot, and then the other is a call center agent audio solution. Now, on the next slide, which I'll be showing shortly, is how we have embedded generative AI to model an individual readiness for a behavioral change using the Fox model. We needed to consider like the basic model. So for the Fox model, consider three critical factors. One is motivation. So what was the desire for the change? What's motivating a user to want to adopt a contraception? And then we look at ability, how easy or how difficult it is. We had to go local because we're looking local use cases, and then we had to consider things like amount of the contraceptive product. Here you see something like 500 Naira being labeled as ability, prevent pregnancy, being labeled as motivation. And then we look at the prompts, the trigger for the change. So these were call center conversations that were transcribed, and then we embedded a large language model to perform name entity recognition. So with these three key indicators, which is motivation, ability, and trigger, we're able to, model a person's individual readiness for a change. So we have three basic models: either the person is not ready for a change, almost ready for a change, or the person is ready for a change. And what this helps to do is what we have on the next slide, really.
Just one comment. Can you please slow down a little? We do have simultaneous interpretation, and so the interpreter is having a hard time following. Thank you.
Great. All right. So I'm just going to, if you can go back to the previous slide. Thank you. All right. So here we actually model a person individual readiness for a behavioral change. So here we use three critical factors, which is motivation, and then we use ability, and then trigger. So the result of this particular intervention is what we have on the next slide, where we're able to determine a person's readiness level. And what this really helps to is to develop a persuasive message. So if you're able to detect that a user is ready for a behavioral change, then what comes next is what's the best, what's the next best thing to say? If you could change the slide.
Shion, are you frozen by
next
me?
Slide.
Good. Okay. No, please go back to the slide because you were frozen for a second.
My slide is not changing.
Yeah, you may have to speak to this one again because you were frozen for a sec. Maybe just repeat this one and then go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
All right. Okay, so here we're able to develop the most persuasive message to trigger a behavioral change, or we call it the next best thing to say. So here on the slide, we have one of the solutions with the chatbot, and for this chatbot, you are able to type. We gathered lots of localized slang. How do people talk about their sexual behavior? In Nigeria, most people won't call condom. Okay, so there are key terminologies. We did an extensive research in getting local use cases. How do people, explain their behavioral perspective? And so these were things that we used to fine tune our LLM so that it can give response. And looking at that slide, you see misspelling, you see short form of words, and then the bot is still able to, identify and give the person the right response. So our goal really is to promote positive sexual and reproductive behavior change. So in terms of future trend, we see generative AI being more emotionally intelligent to support and provide not just responsible, emphatic responses. And also we see AI in augmented decision making to support and provide data-driven insight for strategic planning. And so this is just a sniff of what we do at DSN and what we are currently working on in pushing for social and behavioral change. So thank you. Over, Hanji.
And thank you, Sheun. I'm sure there is many questions in the chat already, which maybe you can answer directly. And I see Sarah is also active. Fabulous. Please ask questions. Next slide, please. We are now switching over to the next topic. I had talked about how to democratize access to AI applications. And what you're seeing here is a map of the still very large digital divide. So digital access is not distributed equally at all. In blue are the countries with 90 to 100% access, no surprise there. But then in yellow, with half of that, 50 to 59%. And then on the continent, on the African continent, we have quite a few countries in yellow, but then also those in dark brown and even black, which signifies 0 to 9% access. What is important to note, and Sarah reminded me of that, is that the map is not just about the technical infrastructures of having cable, but also about the prohibitive cost of data. So again, digital divide, not just issue of infrastructure, but an issue of equitable access. And we have two speakers here who are working on applications to increase all people's access to AI applications. And over to you, Pacific, who, by the way, educated me that it's not Viamo, as I've been saying the entire time, but Viamo, like via mobile. Can't believe I mispronounced it for so long. Over to you, Pacific.
You pronounced it well, Anche. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be talking to you about Viamo, which is really short for Via Mobile. So Viamo is basically an organization that deals with voice-based technology, or IVR. Originally, or what we have across the continent in Africa and also in Asia, is something that's IVR. And you might have used IVR before, that's interactive voice responses. If you've called a call center in the past, or you've called the bank, you might have gotten number buttons and pressed number buttons to hear a pre-recorded voice message. And that is version 1 of the Viamo platform, where users across Africa are able to call into the Viamo platform and listen to pre-recorded messages, basically on social behavioral change topics that range from health, financial literacy, agriculture, and things like that. Version 2 is a digital assistant, and we think of it as something that has limited opportunities. Next slide, please.
Welcome back to the 667 service. To try out the 667 Ask Me Anything feature, press 1. You can ask me anything and I will do my best to answer. What would you like to ask?
What drugs can somebody take to treat malaria?
How does one deal with severe depression?
Where can we buy tomato fertilizer in Zambia?
So how can I start up a business in Zambia?
Where can I get a small business loan in Zambia?
What is climate change?
Thank you for your question. Please wait for a minute while I find an answer for you. The most ideal time to grow tomatoes is during the cooler months of the year, which occurs between May and August. Here are some institutions that can offer small business loans. 1. Standard Bank, They offer business loans and the requirements include having a registered business. 2. Pro-credit banks. They specialize in small and mid-sized enterprises. Several stores around Zambia stock agricultural inputs like fertilizer. Some of these include Agritech Expo Zambia in Kisamba, ETT Inputs Zambia Limited in Lusaka, and Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia in Kafue. Setting up a business in Zambia involves several steps. Here are the first 3 key steps. 1. Registration. This includes registering your business name with the Patents and Companies Registration Agency, PACRA, and obtaining your unique identification number.
Use this in your day-to-day work?
Yes, I would, because it's easier than typing. You just get to ask.
Okay, I would use it to research on things I'm not clear about. Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard Pacifica. Were you ready to continue?
I think it's a connection issue. Pacific, are you
Oh.
okay? Yeah, maybe a
Hey,
connection
thank
issue.
Pacifica, you might want to turn off your camera. I'm not sure if that will help at all, but
Yes, I was saying, yes.
Pacific, can you continue? Maybe we just, what you're looking at is basically the uptake of the AI application at the Viamo. Viamo is running a voice-based platform to begin with. You know, many of you may be familiar with the 321 platform, also in Uganda. And they've added basically Pacific, are you back? Maybe turn your video off.
Yes,
Yeah, and
I'm
continue.
back.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry about that. So I wanted to give us a snippet of what that looks like and what that has looked like in Zambia when we've piloted it. And just what you can see here is a breakdown of successful users by gender. And what you see here is that they are, more female users at 59% compared to male users. And then you also see like more younger users, who we would consider youth using it compared to like older people. And then when you look at the location breakdown, if you're in Zambia, you would notice that this is being used mostly by people in the rural areas compared to people in urban areas. Next slide, please. I wanted us to also look at a breakdown of the topics that we've had the privilege of seeing being asked. So we see like a lot of SDG related questions: agriculture, biology, business, communication, and education. All this to say, we are giving an opportunity to users who generally wouldn't have access to the internet to ask questions that they wouldn't generally be able to ask, which is something that we take for granted, I would say. With access to the internet, we are able to type into Google whatever we want, or we are able to go onto GPT and ask it a question. But for an end user in the most remotest part of Zambia who doesn't have a smartphone, smartphone penetrations are really below 40% for some of the MNOs that we partner with. You see the need to be able to access this information that sometimes sometimes can be life-saving, and then we are able to give those users the opportunity to use it. Next slide, please. Now, in order to fully democratize the access of generative AI, we've learned that language technology is critical for development. Some of the numbers at the very top of this, you see that in Nigeria, we have over 3 million users on the Vayamo platform that speak Hausa, or over 100,000 users that speak Tonga. In Asia, 13,000 users that speak Bhojpuri and, Punjabi, over 10,000 users. Unfortunately, because of the way that generative AI comes about, or how language models come about, we need language data to be able to create models in local languages to further make it so the users that do not speak English, cannot understand English, are able to utilize these tools that help in both, access to very critical life-changing information, but also social behavioral change topics. So we are exploring, and we're very excited to be partnering with a lot of partners that are looking into seeing how we can further make it so that Ask Vayamo Anything, better known as AVA, is accessible in many local languages. It has been a bit of a challenge because that data simply does not exist on the internet. Users who speak these languages typically haven't recorded themselves or put themselves on platforms on the internet for us to be able to generate audios in those languages. And so we've been working with a lot of partners to see if, we can go around and have them recorded or things like that. And so we are really, really exploring how we can further democratize access to generative AI. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to partnering with you. Please reach out to us on the website, on the email there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, Pacific, and maybe put the website also in the chat and your contact. And I think Vayamo is also looking for curated content, to talk about the correctness of information and have access to that as well. So now we're heading over to Gayatri Yajal, showing us how Dimagi's Open Chat Studio works and also democratizes access to AI. Over to you, Gayatri.
Thanks so much, and it's great to be here. So I'll get started by saying, a couple of things. I think we've heard a lot about AI from these great presentations. One thing that I wanted to start with is that, like Sarah said, AI can mean many different things, right? All the way from ChatGPT to very dangerous robots or something, right? Like AI can cross that whole spectrum. The AI that I'll be talking about here is one particular kind of AI, which is the same as generative AI, which is large language models. So the big companies that I'm sure you've heard of, like OpenAI, Anthropic, all of these companies, what do they make? They make large language models. So on the left-hand side here, you see a large language model, and there are many, right? So OpenAI has them. So if you hear GPT-4, you may have heard OpenAI has a new model, GPT-4o. You've heard of Claude by Anthropic. Meta have their own models. Google have models too. And so these large language models, they are essentially models that are trained on all of the internet. So, or at least large portions of the internet. So for example, books or journalism or newspaper articles or videos or songs, these models are trained on all of that. So you can think of it as a very large brain that has much of the internet, that has been trained on much of the internet. And so ChatGPT is a chatbot, really, and it's powered by these models. So without these models, we would not have ChatGPT as we have it now. And so at Dimagi, the question that we asked was, a couple of years ago, right before ChatGPT launched, we had gotten a very large family planning project using chatbots for behavior change, for sexual and reproductive health, that were implementing via the Gates Foundation with two partners, one in East Africa, one in West Africa, who you may have heard of. They may even be on this call, Shujaz in East Africa and Rais in West Africa. And so as soon as we kind of got that project, ChatGPT launched. And so our question was, you have ChatGPT. ChatGPT is great, but ChatGPT is not contextualized to the context in which we work. And ChatGPT will not have kind of tailored answers for people in specific contexts. Also, ChatGPT may not necessarily work well in local languages, for example, Chichewa in Malawi or Shona in Zimbabwe. So our question is, can we use models to make chatbots ourselves? So you have ChatGPT as one chatbot, and then our question is, can you make lots of other chatbots using the same large language model? And so that led us to create Open Chat Studio with support from the Gates Foundation Family Planning Investment. And so basically how this works is on ChatGPT, you can pick different models. So you can pick from OpenAI's models, you can pick from Anthropic's models. In the future, we hope to have open source models, which will be much more cost effective and hopefully work better in local languages. And so a user, and they don't need to be an engineer. I am not an engineer. They don't need to have, expertise in AI. I don't, other than working on these tools. And so, really what you need is your programmatic expertise as social and behavioral program managers and leads. And so you can go onto this platform, you can pick which model you want to use. Maybe you want to use OpenAI's model, maybe you want to do something else. And you can give instructions to that model. So you can say, you are a social and behavior change chatbot for, and your purpose is to encourage people to take their medicines for TB, or your purpose is to encourage the uptake of contraception. And then you can specify how the chatbot should do that. So one thing I'll say is that maybe we can think about two types of chatbots. One is like the ChatGPT kind of chatbot where you ask a question and the chatbot responds. At the Maggie, our belief is that those chatbots are valuable. They have a place. We make them. However, making chatbot-led interaction. So having a chatbot that leads a user through a specific interaction to meet a behavior change objective, that's our goal. So our chatbots are much more kind of proactive. And on Open Chat Studio, many of our partner organizations, they make chatbots that are kind of proactive. And so the chatbot takes the user through like a story or a game or a quiz for social and behavior change purposes. And then people can deploy those chatbots on multiple channels like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, things like that. So no one needs to have a ChatGPT account. We know that many of the people that we want to make chatbots for may never have heard of OpenAI. They may never have heard of ChatGPT, and that's okay. But they should ideally be able to use these tools on channels that are accessible to them. For example, Facebook Messenger, for example, WhatsApp. Next slide, please. And so at the Maggie, you can think about kind of three broad areas or categories of chatbots that we're making in large part for social and behavior change. One is chatbots for individuals, one is chatbots for frontline workers, and one is chatbots for the global health sector. Next slide, please. So this is one example of a chatbot to understand the barriers that women face to the uptake of micronutrient supplements. So the goal of this chatbot is first to understand why someone may not be taking their supplements. So on the right-hand side, and I apologize, the text is quite small, is a chatbot that we made using a large language model. I think it was OpenAI's GPT-4. And then here you can see the interaction where the chatbot says, hi, I'm from the Maggie. Can you chat for a few minutes? And the user says, sure, like if you're fast, but I'm on a bus. And so the chatbot replies, okay, I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to understand, are you taking your supplements? Why not? And then they kind of have a conversation about it. Why? Because, a chatbot that kind of purely tells someone to take supplements, is probably probably not going to be as effective as a chatbot that, attempts to understand someone's barriers to taking supplements. Next slide, please. And then we also have a large focus on chatbots for coaching community health workers. So we know that many of the behavioral interventions are, ultimately led by community health workers in LMIC context. And so enabling them to better be able to do their jobs is a large part of our focus and the Dimagi's focus in general. And so this is just one example of kind of many FLW chatbots that we're making, and it's a vaccine coach. So here, Dimagi has a large project in Malawi that we run. And so over there, we have community health volunteers who have enrolled in one of our campaigns. And their goal is to make house visits or to make home visits in order to counsel parents on child vaccines. And so here we have this kind of check-in chatbot that debriefs with the FLW after she's done with her visit. So it asks her, how did it go? What did you say? Was there any vaccine hesitancy expressed? How did you respond? And then as the chatbot goes along, asking the user these questions, it's also coaching her on motivational interviewing techniques. And so that's another way to think about working in social and behavioral change into real-time interventions. Next slide, please. So just to quickly recap, we have this platform. Any organization, and you don't need to be an engineer, nor do you need to have expertise in AI. Really, what you need is your programmatic expertise, and of course, everyone on this call has that. And so you can make your own chatbots, and then you can also deploy them on channels like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and others. The platform is not available for public signups. So below you can see 2 email addresses. You can email either of them or both of them. I'll drop them in the chat as well. If you'd like an account, and one thing that we're able to do is that for a short amount of time, like say a month, we also enable access to other features that allows you to quickly test and deploy these chatbots on your own with small groups of users. So do please get in touch. It would be great to be able to work with you on chatbot ideas that you have for social and behavior change. And I'll hand over back. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gayatri. Very helpful, and yeah, great to add the links back into the chat, which is quite active. I'm seeing a lot of interactivity there. Very good. Now we're coming to, and we're leaving the area of generative AI, by the way, and the chatbots for now, and are coming to look at AI-powered predictive models, which are quite different. And so we have Chris Mahoney here, which is great, and you are up next. You are using AI capacity to predict social phenomena with your team at Peloria. And I wanted to know more about what AI applications are included into your models to predict social phenomena. Chris, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. And I can see you too. Very good.
Wonderful. First, thank you to the organizers for the opportunity, to Angie for bringing this group together. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be alongside everybody and speak about these important topics. And I was able to join for part of the previous keynote speaker, and I think he put out some challenges. He talked much about what needs to be done, but perhaps didn't go quite to the how, right? And when he spoke to the importance of context specific knowledge, information, to inform AI-powered models, that's precisely what gets us excited at Peloria, because our mission is to drive evidence-based approaches to inclusive, just, and resilient, inclusive, just, and sustainable societies, and to do that, to bring government, the private sector, and civil society together around that evidence, right? And in effect, what we do is we engage in social science informed AI. And what that means is that we draw on local diverse local lived experience in a territory where we're trying to predict a phenomena, right? And we draw on a diversity of disciplinary expertise on the thing that we're trying to predict in that location, right? And this all comes from the assumption that when we're trying to forecast and explain change in social phenomena, historically, places like the World Bank, the United Nations have sort of tested change in one or two real phenomena with change in a dependent variable, right? And of course, as we know, human behavior is informed not just by reality, but by perceptions of it. And so into our models, we ingest data representing change in the built world, the social world, and the natural world, as well as online language metadata about all of those things, right? And so it's that that information ecosystem, whether it's people's direct interactions with other people, or it's the online and print and radio information ecosystem that they're exposed to, that actually informs their view of what is going on around them and what and their behavior in response to it. So if you go to the next slide, Antje, it gives us a crude synopsis of the kind of data that we're ingesting into our models. If our colleagues are able to change to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so you'll see that sort of in the natural world, everything that might go into a model that predicts the likelihood of natural disasters. So you've got, precipitation, soil moisture, temperature, crop type, crop yield, crop failure. Then in the social world, you might have traffic data, macro and microeconomic data, government reserves on hand, global commodity prices, local commodity prices, business-to-business sales, political event data, violence event data, and then in the built world you'd have and this is where we're starting to overcome some of these hurdles in terms of data scarcity. Even some of the most data scarce territories in the world, for example, the Horn of Africa, we don't even know how many people really are where and how that's changing, right? In a sort of a live way. And so we capture weekly or monthly satellite imagery, and we can then develop object classification models that are able to classify the number and density of built structures, for example, in 56 towns and cities in the borderlands region of Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And we can see that changing month to month over 5 years. That's an enormous step forward for development actors, who might do a household survey of a representative sample, but that is a snapshot in time, right? And in territories that where migration and human behavior is highly seasonal, it can be quite a misrepresentation, let alone only a representation of something, of a situation a year ago that might have changed dramatically, right? And so when we're able to see that month to month or even week to week change, then that's highly consequential, particularly when we triangulate it with those household surveys that tell us, on average, how many people live in a built structure, what is the average level of poverty or household vulnerability attached to a certain number of built structures, and that then lowers that inequality of data representing these key phenomena in data scarce territories compared, to perhaps what we might see in advanced economies. But another question is really about the different uses of AI, right? So we're not just gathering all this data and then ingesting it into models. We use deep neural network models that predict, right? And we can verify the level of accuracy that gives development actors a level of confidence to act or not, right? But we also engage in what we call integrated gradient and ablation analysis. So that tells us of all this universe of change in both different dimensions of reality and language perceptions of it, which factors are most associated with change, right? And that then allows development and humanitarian actors to be much more precise about what they do, at what time of day, what they do, where, when, with what collaborators, and even how they communicate about it, so that that precision can be targeted at the greatest, at the most impactful activities, at the most vulnerable populations, to obviously increase levels of impact. And I'll just put in the chat here a couple of examples. You know, one is a link to the Displacement Crisis Response Mechanism, which is the world's first human displacement risk financing mechanism in Uganda, right? And so here, the World Bank has prearranged finance, and that finance is triggered by the number of persons per functioning water point, persons per health center, school-aged children per classroom in districts hosting refugees, right? So when, say, the number of children breaches 120 per classroom in a district, that triggers a disbursement to scale that capacity up, right? And what that means is that it puts government in a position to be able to say, okay, we are responding to the greatest level of need, and it puts government in a position where they're less vulnerable, say, to more influential politicians sort of focusing government resources on their districts, right? And it drives government legitimacy because they can point to this metric. Now what we're doing is we're also exploring the capacity to predict like daily refugee flows into Uganda from both South Sudan and DRC, right? And what that means is that we can trigger a potential disbursement of finance and start a procurement process, right? That actually enables us to be able to go to that district and say, okay, at the time the refugees are resettled, we're not waiting until that time to trigger a disbursement, a procurement, and then the construction of new public service capacity, right? Instead, the procurement's already happened. Now that the refugees are entering, you know that the construction is about to start almost immediately. That's a huge step forward for the responsiveness, the precision, and therefore the impact of development activities. And it goes precisely to what the keynote speaker was referring to, in the sense that, okay, AI has been employed significantly in the public health space. Yes, it has. It's also starting, and I put a link there to to a short lightning talk at the World Bank's Fragility Forum, where we spoke about some of these World Bank applications.
Thanks very much, Chris. And you answered all three questions in one swoop here, which is fantastic. I think what I like a lot about Peloria is what's shown on the slide here, is that you're not only working with big data, you're also informing and verifying basically the AI analysis with social science data, with social media data, and even with sentiment analysis in order to predict basically conflict or other phenomena. So really interesting. I'm sure you have more questions. Please ask Chris directly in the chat and let people see what you're asking so that we can all learn. I have to move on, Chris, because we're running a little out of time. So I'm heading over to the last piece of our presentations, especially around the question, is AI our new best friend here for SBC? We need to address ethical and research questions around AI applications. And you see on the slide, of course, all the ones that you've been asking and others have been asking as well. What about data privacy and consent? What about lack of transparency and accountability? When something goes wrong, who's to blame? What about rigor, validity of data, which Chris has talked about a little bit, quality hallucinations, which has been addressed in the chat a little bit, correctness of responses to avoid fabricated citations. What are we predicting? I think this is a question for Chris also. Is it correlation or causation? How do we deal with that? Mis and disinformation was addressed in the chat. What about safety safeguarding? Large environmental cost, which we haven't addressed yet. I think that's a large topic going through the media at the moment. If somebody has a link, please add them. What about exclusion, exploitation, job loss? These are also questions that move people around. And for all of that, we have another expert, Mehdi. You're up next, Mehdi Snen, who is currently working as part of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology and works on global guidance to address many of these issues. Mehdi, are you there?
Oh, 1 minute, please. I see I missed giving permission, I think, to one of the
Right, yeah,
logins. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. And maybe because of time issues, I may not ask so much, why is global governance needed? I think we all know that it is important, but Mehdi, if you can hear me, maybe talk about the challenges a little bit, you know, of such a large project. Can you go back? Yeah, thank you. And then we can kind of try to come to answers a little closer to SBC. Over to you, Mehdi.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all of you for this excellent session. As you said, I'm working in the Secretariat of the SG High Level Advisory Board on AI, and then we are looking at this large multilateral governance mechanism that should be enabled, or we are looking into, should we intervene, should we create this multilateral governance models? The technical problem is literally what we call it in the foresight space, Colin-Wright dilemma, which is where you have the technology that is not mature enough to be governed, but at the same time, if you let it go, then it will be big enough to where you cannot anymore put any governance models on the top of it. And that problem gives us put us in the situation where the governance model itself should evolve, especially when it comes to the ethical issues. And then in such rapidly evolving landscape where the AI is changing mainly on a daily basis, the governance framework within the UN, where we are thinking, is shifting from a very rigid perspective mechanism that we used to have for other digital means to a more robust framework to enable the trust and cooperation among the multilateral aspects and with the international AI communities. The idea is to create a governance model that is based on trust and that can facilitate transparent sharing of information and best practices, and especially reduce the competitive tensions because of the raise of the tensions. And then that will enable or disable the access to the opportunities of the AI. Even the governance model should not be looked at only from the perspective of reduction of risks, but also about how to maximize the opportunities and reduce the gap in terms of usage and access to the AI. I think that's the most important thing, getting all countries sitting around the same table with the same voice, sharing the same perspective when it comes to the governance. It's very important. And then this is one of the biggest challenge, how to get all these countries that are at different maturity levels, talking about something that is very dynamic and changing in the time scale, and ending up with building this trust or enabled trust environment that will lead to a governance model maybe in the upcoming months. And this trust model should be maintained, sustained over the time and over the different economic pressures that we have. As you may know, this governance at first was called by economic actors, namely OpenAI, saying that they need to be governed because of the amount of risks they have oversee. But I think that we've shifted from this perspective to a much more human rights-centered governance models that is based on multilateral aspects and trust.
That is very helpful to understand what's going on, and it is in and onto itself super challenging, I'm sure. Maybe let us know, what is the most urgent regulation in your mind for the application of AI for social and behavior change? What is it that you see needs to be regulated quickly, urgently?
I think, well, yeah, I'll do it very quickly. As you know, I'm coming from public health perspective and more on mental health. And then that's where we've struggled even with the digital health. And that's where digital health collapsed. I think that's AI in different disciplines dealing with personalized data should put the emphasis on informed and the information and how to create these informed consent from end users. That's the most important thing. At that time, if you are full transparent, you are making sure that your end users understanding well, fully, what are the dimensions of the usage of the AI with their data, giving full options of getting in, opt in or opt out from these systems, understanding the entire value chain of the AI, from data collection to the interactions with the AI. This gives us firstly, the perspective of informing, being transparent, being accountable, being ethical, to include the fairness and the non-discrimination, to include the privacy and data protection. That will bring us a human oversight inside of that will bring some safety and security. As long as we are not hidden in a corner doing this AI without hitting anyone, this should be the case. So I think end users, informed consent, these are my 3 words for the SBC.
Thank you very much, Mehdi, and sorry to cut you a little short. I think if you're in the chat, ask Mehdi more on the how and what you need to watch out for. I think he will be happy to respond. So please go ahead in the chat. I think we're moving over to our last slide with Sarah. Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm back.
Sarah is back and will round us off here also on how you can get engaged yourself and how you can also get some of your questions answered going forward, which of course we can't do in just one quick panel. So Sarah, before we then go into the last round of Q&A. Go ahead, Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Antje. So I want to start off by letting you know that we have a social and behavior change and generative AI working group, Community of Practice, hosted by the MerleTech Initiative. And we like to work out loud, as we say. So we experiment with all kinds of tools, AI tools, and their possibilities for social and behavior change because we want to learn from each other and we do not want to repeat each other's mistakes. So my first plea is to the funders and big NGOs on the call to please fund us so that we can keep doing this work going forward, developing guidelines and tools. And then I also want to urge you all to join us at the NLP Community of Practice. I'm going to share the links with you. We want you to also contribute to our tool mapping. So we've created an Excel spreadsheet that shows all the tools that are being developed right now, for what purpose and so on. So we want to keep track of the different tools that are SBC related. Please add your tools on there. And then we also, this is a bit of a hard ask, but we do want you to share your failures with us if you can, because we, like I just said, we do not want to repeat each other's mistakes. And then for any tool that you develop, please prioritize user research and digital literacy support. So don't launch tools without doing some sort of pre-testing. So I'm going to put the links in the chats. And again, please do fund us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So, here are your next steps. There is a specific SBC and AI working group that we should all join and be engaged. Next slide, please.
Thanks. Anji, I'm sorry, but we really don't have time for the Q&A. So we apologize to the fabulous panel. Thank you so much for answering in the chat and Q&A throughout the session.
Yeah, can you go to the last slide and I'm just going to round it off. Yeah, thank you. So I wanted you to see, no, the one before.